Hey everyone, welcome back to the Goku Report. And this is a new box office versus. It's been a while since I've done one of these, but I thought it was time. And I'm going to look at two animated films that were both released the same year, back in the 1980s. We will be looking at two mouse films that would go against each other in this time period. It would be a battle between Walt Disney and a former Walt Disney higher up and a highly respected animator to this day. And of course, that is the great Don Bluth. So, with that said, welcome back for a new episode of Video Game Box Office Versus, as I like to call this mini series. I'm working on a couple for next month. I'm going to be doing one more of these for this month, the month of September, probably about 2 weeks from now, I would say. So towards probably the beginning of the second half of the month. We'll look. And I'll give more info on my next top 10 list I'll be doing here. So with that said, the two that I'm working on for October will be Halloween themed. So keep that in mind. So, this is the box office versus The Great Mouse Detective versus An American Tail. So, first off, both films, of course, as I said, are animated films, and both revolve around mice. Both released in 1986 specifically. Both also rated G. Length of both films versus The Great Mouse Detective would clock in at an hour and 14 minutes. And An American Tail would clock in at 1 hour and 20 minutes. So just 6 minutes longer. Also, with An American Tail would also have involved the great Steven Spielberg would be involved with the film. Looking at box office numbers according to Box Office Mojo. Now, before that, mention budgets, and as I always do this, I give basic info. Then I look at Category 2 is box office. Category 3 is looking at Rotten Tomatoes, critics, and audiences on both. Then Category 4, if you will, Metacritic, critic score, and user or audience score. And then last, look at IMDb, and then I give my own personal opinion on both films. And I can only do these verses with films I have seen both movies, so I can give an honest opinion. But The Great Mouse Detective would end up having a budget of around $14 million. Keep in mind, in the 80s and stuff, animation was still relatively expensive, and 14 million now may not seem like much. 14 million, if you add in inflation and everything, it'd probably be closer to around like maybe 30 million today. Now, An American Tail, unfortunately, budget is not known, or at least it's not posted, unfortunately, on Watch Mojo, or on Box Office Mojo. Wrong Mojo. One's good and one's not. First up, Great Mouse Detective. Total, both films would only receive domestic releases in North America, unfortunately. Great Mouse Detective would end up doing $38,625,550. Now, the Don Bluth film, An American Tail, would end up doing $47,483 or and $2, but whatever. Overall, both films. Now, basically, American Tail would end up doing close to $9 million more dollars at the box office. So that may not seem like a big deal, but it was, especially when you were going up against the juggernaut that is the Walt Disney Company. That was unseen before. Seeing a new arch rival coming up and dethroning it, and that American Tail would end up the more successful of the two films domestically. Even if it's not a huge amount, still, it gave bragging rights. And looking back today, I think it's in more recent years, The Great Mouse Detective has gained a cult following, and American Tail has always had like a very loyal fan base, especially for Don Bluth fans and Spielberg fans, I would say. Uh, Next, we go to Rotten Tomatoes. On critic scores, The Great Mouse Detective had an 80% critic score and had a 79% audience score. So overall, very positive, well liked by both audiences. One of the few times when it's pretty much the same. Now we go over to An American Tail. Critic score was 71%, so unfortunately 9 points below. And audience score was surprisingly also 71%. So in both of those areas in the Rotten Tomatoes category, Great Mouse Detective did better. While American Tail won in the area box office. Looking at Metacritic, however, we look and boy is it a difference. On Metacritic, critic score is a 73% on for The Great Mouse Detective, and the audience score, user score, is a 7.5 out of 10. Now here's the real big difference is when we go over to An American Tail. On Metacritic scores, the critic score on Metacritic for American Tail is 38%. Talking about a huge difference. Funny enough, however, user scores are actually the same. Um, Audience scores on Metacritic is also a 7.5 out of 10. Exactly the same as The Great Mouse Detective. So, among audiences, liked both films equally. And then the last, IMDb. On IMDb, The Great Mouse Detective receives a 7.2 out of 10, which is pretty good overall. An American Tail, it would actually end up being relatively closer here, and it would end up, An American Tail would do a 6.9 out of 10, so a 0.3 difference on Metacritic, or rather, IMDb. But now, last, what is my personal opinion on the films? I do agree that American Tail, or rather, I should say first, though, with The Great Mouse Detective, it's a great film. If you are a fan of classic, like, style Sherlock Holmes stuff, I think you'll like it. Plus, I'll be honest, Ratigan is I think, criminally underrated Disney villain. He is actually really good. His musical number, Ratigan, is great. He is, in my opinion, a criminally underrated villain, and in general, I think this is a criminally underrated Disney film, in my opinion. I feel the same way about The Black Cauldron, though. I'm a big defender of The Black Cauldron, and I don't know why the film doesn't get more love than it deserves. It doesn't get enough love. The Great Mouse Detective doesn't get enough love. Heck, of course, as I've said before, I'll say it again. I think the sequel of Rescuers Down Under is an incredibly criminally underrated film. And I don't think it's as underrated. The other, that being Oliver and Company, I think that was an okay film, but the others deserve so much more love than they get. But overall, at the end of the day, which film do I personally like more? I have to go with An American Tail. Why? It was the one I saw first growing up. And I'll be honest, I was raised on Don Bluth films. That was a big part of my childhood. It wouldn't be until I became older kid into like preteen years and stuff that I would really start being introduced to more Disney stuff. In my childhood years and stuff, Don Bluth films were a big part of my life. I mean, whether it be An American Tail, whether it be, um, what? Like Land Before Time, Secret of the Nim, or heck, I'll throw a bone to Fievel Goes West. Also, I love many other films from Don Bluth throughout the years. Thumbelina. And, heck, All Dogs Go to Heaven. The point I'm trying to make is, frankly, An American Tail deserves the love that it does get, but I think that The Great Mouse Detective deserves a lot of love. Which film do I recommend personally? At the end of the day, I recommend watch both of the movies. Do yourself a service. Watch both films. Both have great music. And even if it's kind of hard at times to handle the little child that sings Somewhere Out There, it's an all time classic song that will always have a nostalgia factor for me. That's the big thing. At the end of the day, for an American Tail and many animated films, for many people's youths, is going to be what they gravitate towards at the end of the day. Nostalgia is a powerful thing, and companies certainly understand this. That's why they do so much 80s and now 90s stuff. Nostalgia sells. It's as simple as that. But that is it for this edition of Box Office Versus. The Great Mouse Detective versus An American Tail. Two incredible films that I recommend watching both. But with that said, I'm going to leave it as a surprise, the next edition of this for September. I am announcing, of course, one of the two that I will be working on for October will be horror, definitely, and I've already mentioned the past working on, and it will be The Conjuring versus The Conjuring 2. And the other one, I'm going to keep a surprise for now, but it's going to be a duke out, it's going to be a battle between two stop motion films for the other one for October. So stay tuned for that, and I'll see y'all next time. Hopefully you enjoyed the retro wave music in the background, and just stay safe with all the craziness going on. And of course, this is the Goku Report. See you soon.